Hello, everyone. I see you guys entering the room. Come on in, take a seat. There are plenty of chairs here for you. I ask you to please fill in the front rows if you could. That will make our speaker feel nice and comfortable and welcome. Depending on your time zone, this might coincide with your happy hour, and if it does, I hope that you have a glass, a snifter, a flagon of your favorite beverage. Please know that I do as well. We've got about, good 200 folks who are here. Thank you so much, and I will now take this opportunity to say welcome. Welcome to Skeptical Inquirer Presents. This is the first of a series of live online presentations from experts who are devoted to advancing science over pseudoscience, media literacy over conspiracy theories, and critical thinking over magical thinking. So now might be a good time for you to check your ticket and make sure that you are in the right place. So for example, if you logged on thinking that this was how to be a better magical thinker, you are indeed in the wrong place, everybody. So if you that lecture is down the hall. So if you want to log out and head on over there, completely understandable. But I actually encourage you to stay because I think this will be interesting. And so let me take this opportunity to introduce myself for those of you who do not know me. My name is Leanne Lord. I am a stand-up comedian, author, and a relatively new co-host for Point of Inquiry, the podcast for the Center for Inquiry. I believe I had the pleasure of perhaps meeting some of you in person last year at SciCon. I had hoped to be there again this year, but apparently 2020 had other plans for us. But in the interim, CFI and Skeptical Inquirer have really stepped up and into the fight against misinformation, which seems to really proliferate exponentially, particularly around COVID-19. And that's what our guest tonight is here to speak to. He is an associate professor of political science at the University of Miami in Florida. A moment of silence for Florida. Apparently, stand your ground doesn't work against the virus. Who knew? Our guest studies public opinion and mass media with a focus on conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation, which means he must not get a lot of sleep at all, you guys. But somehow he found time to co-author American Conspiracy Theories, as well as be an editor for Conspiracy Theories and People Who Believe Them. Now, I have to share that I don't necessarily consider myself a conspiracy theory person, but according to his latest book, which is Conspiracy Theories, a Primer, everybody has at least one. But given the number of conspiracy theories that are out there, everybody probably has a few. So before I turn this over to him, I want to let you guys know the flow of the evening. Our intention is for this to be very easy breezy. I introduce him, he does his thing, you will be razzled and dazzled, and then comes everybody's favorite part, the Q&A. And so if you don't live on Zoom, which I'd be surprised if you don't, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, there is an icon that says Q&A. And that's what you would click on to mosey over and type in your question. I encourage you to phrase your question in the form of a question, as opposed to a statement. I also encourage you to err on the side of brevity. Hopefully that will improve clarity. And just so you know, the font that this platform uses, this sans serif font, is not easy on the eye. Particularly the naked eye and an eye that is attached to me and is older than it looks. So if you can help me help you get your question in, I think we will all be happy. Now, this is the moment I think that we are all waiting for, all 272 of you. I see you. Thank you for coming. This is the point where I get to hand this off to the person who is going to be telling us a thing or two about COVID-19 conspiracy theories. And so, Professor Joe Uscinski, you have the con.
Well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction, and thank you to the Center for inviting me to talk to all of you. It's good to be amongst friends. I wish I could be doing this with all of you in Vegas this year, but I guess I will have to settle for doing this and just drinking my CSI Con wine from 2018 tonight. So I'm going to talk about conspiracy theories for about half an hour. I'm going to talk to you about the latest polls, particularly the latest polls about COVID-19 conspiracy theories. I'm going to spend a little while talking about why these beliefs are popular or not that popular in some cases. And then because it's a talk amongst friends, I'm going to go a little bit meta. So I don't think I need to spend that much time talking to this group about why conspiracy theories might be dangerous or why we should rely on better information rather than poorly sourced information. So what I'm going to do is spend some time talking about what's wrong with the popular discussions of conspiracy theories out there. What are the things that the journalists and perhaps some scholars are getting wrong? And I'm going to answer what I think is one of the more important questions nowadays, and that has to do with what are the dangers of believing the wrong things about beliefs in the wrong things. So a little bit meta. So just to begin, I define a conspiracy theory as a accusatory perception in which we think that there's a small group of people, powerful people, acting in secret for their own benefit against the common good, and in a way that undermines our bedrock ground rules against widespread force and fraud. In addition, this theory hasn't been found to be true by the appropriate epistemological organizations, by the appropriate experts, using data and evidence that is out in the open for everyone to refute. So there are numerous conspiracy theories about COVID-19 out there, and there's in fact too many to debunk. So most of our journalists are spending a lot of time just trying to keep up with the nonsense that's out there. Recently, Reuters had to debunk a claim that 35,000 malnourished and caged, what were called mole children, had been rescued by Trump and the military from the satanic deep state, and that the deep state were sex trafficking these children and then eating them for magical powers, and that Trump had rescued them, and that COVID was nothing but a ruse to rescue these mole children. Well, that never really happened, and in fact, Reuters found that false in their fact check. But that theory only morphed further into recently, it's now the Wayfair children, where people think that the furniture company Wayfair is selling children in their furniture, and that's why the furniture costs so much. Again, that's not true either. But we've seen a deluge of other conspiracy theories, whether it's Bill Gates or George Soros are up to no good, and they're behind COVID-19. Some people have said that 5G technology is spreading the virus further, and some people have taken action on that by burning down cell towers across the world. Some people think that when the vaccine is released to us, that we're going to be microchipped and tracked by the government. Some people think that Big Pharma is behind the COVID-19 scam, and they're going to make money off selling us a phony vaccine for a phony disease that doesn't really exist. And other people are saying that doctors and hospitals are faking patients in order to make money. So there's a lot of weird theories out there. Luckily, none of these are believed that widely. But if you think about many of the ideas that are out there, they fall into two broad categories, which I've been polling on since March. And the first category is that the disease has been exaggerated for political gain, usually to hurt Trump. And the other is that it is some sort of bioweapon spread on purpose and perhaps created on purpose to purposely injure people. So when we poll on the idea that COVID-19 is being exaggerated to hurt Trump in an election year, we get about 29% of Americans agreeing with that. We get a similar number for the idea that it's a bioweapon that's been spread on purpose, and we get 31% agreeing or strongly agreeing that idea is true. So while some of the more fringy ideas don't get that many people, these two ideas do get about a third of Americans each buying in. So the question is why? Why do people believe conspiracy theories? If you think about it, the real question is, why do people believe anything, really? And the answer to that question is, well, there's lots of reasons why people will come to particular beliefs. And what's important to know is that there's not going to be any single reason why people might believe in conspiracy theories, because there's so many conspiracy theories out there, each with their own idiosyncratic reasons why people would come to believe them. So conspiracy theory is a big bucket, and there could be lots of reasons why somebody could believe in any specific theory. And further than that, I've also been polling on other ideas that have to do with COVID-19, and conspiracy theories aren't the only ones that are dangerous. So for example, in my last poll, we got almost 20% of people who think that getting right with God or praying more will prevent or cure COVID-19. Those ideas can be just as dangerous and deadly as, believing that it's exaggerated and not real. So why do people believe conspiracy theories? In my research, the big explanatory factors are latent dispositions that people have. So the two that I focus on the most are conspiracy thinking and denialism. Now, conspiracy thinking exists on a continuum, and we all have it to one degree or another. Some people have it very strongly. Some people have it, only in tiny amounts, but most people are somewhere in the middle. But people who have very high levels of conspiracy thinking tend to think that everything that happens is the product of a shadowy conspiracy. The people on the low end tend to be resistant to conspiracy theories, however, when they are exposed to them. Denialism works in a similar way. Some people have a very antagonistic relationship with authoritative sources of information. So when they hear something on the news or from scientists or from government agencies, they say, well, I'm just not going to believe it. I don't believe it. And all of us have this to some degree, where we are resistant to things we don't want to hear. But the people who have it quite a bit just don't believe things, whether it's from the news, the government, scientists, or other authoritative sources. Another factor that drives conspiracy beliefs is our group attachments. And the group that I am most concerned with conspiracy theories is our partisan political attachments. And whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or something else, that can lead you to engage in motivated reasoning. It can also lead you to believe in cues that come from elites that you trust. So for example, when our group wins, we say, well, that's how it should be, because our group is righteous and just, and that's how things work out. But when our group loses, we tend to say, well, we may have been cheated. The other side tricked us, and they engaged in illicit practices, and that's why that's why we lost. We were cheated. And elite cues tend to happen when leaders that we trust. So if you follow the president and he engages in conspiracy theories, then you'll be likely to believe those same conspiracy theories. The next factor is information. If we're told information from sources that we trust that there's a conspiracy afoot, then we'll be likely to believe it. And the final factor is that we can imagine our own conspiracy theories and make them up ourselves. So we don't need someone else to share them with us. If we have a strong conspiratorial worldview, then it's not hard to imagine that everything we encounter during the day is part of some conspiracy. So those are the broad reasons. And we can sort of put it into a very simple conceptual model, is that as information comes in to our brains during the day, that information will be laid over the set of dispositions that all of us carry with us. And that information will be interpreted by those dispositions. And that is what will lead us to making particular beliefs about the world each day. So imagine a person who has very strong conspiratorial dispositions will interpret information very differently than a person who doesn't have those same dispositions, but winds up engaging with the same exact information. So same information can lead two different people to very different conclusions about the world. So a lot of the work that's getting done with conspiracy theories is getting done by the dispositions each of us carry with us. So imagine three guys sitting at the pub watching, the evening news on, and let's call that first guy Partisanship and Ideology. And he's watching the news about COVID-19, and he's saying, well, all of this was set up to hurt Trump in an election year. I just don't believe any of it. And the second guy, who we'll call Denialism, is watching the TV and he's seeing the story about COVID-19. He's saying, well, I don't believe what the news says, and I don't believe those doctors, and I don't believe, the CDC or the World Health Organization. Who are they to tell me anything? I'm just not going to believe it. And the third guy is conspiracy thinking, and he's watching the news thinking, well, the media is lying to me. This is all set up by powerful people to put one over on us, and they're probably going to do something really bad, and this is all part of a plot, and I'm just not going to listen to what they have to say. To varying degrees, all of us have these operating within us. I imagine for most of us in this audience, it's very, very low degrees, but for the mass public, these are powerful forces in how they interpret the world, and they are going to lead them, many of them, to believe in conspiracy theories out there, particularly ones about COVID-19. So just to sum up, why do people believe these things? Well, lots of reasons. We have our motivated reasoning at play. We have conspiracy thinking at play. And at the end of the day, that's going to drive us to either engage with conspiracy theories or not, and then to engage with particular conspiracy theories. So why do we care if people believe in these theories or not? Well, there are major problems there. If our beliefs are disconnected from our shared reality, then those beliefs are potentially deleterious. If you believe that COVID-19 is a hoax or isn't really dangerous, then you're not going to engage in best practices like frequent hand washing, mask wearing, or social distancing. And you run the risk of spreading the disease more, catching it yourself, and making the pandemic last longer than it needs to last. But downstream from that, when people start to believe in a lot of conspiracy theories, it can make them distrust our institutions, our government, scientists, and that can lead to a vicious cycle and get them to believe in more conspiracy theories and detach them further from our shared reality. So there are real reasons why we need to fight against these beliefs. But here's the thing, is that we need to get the causal locus right. I mean, right now, a lot of the discussions about conspiracy theories get it wrong. And even the best intentioned journalists are saying the wrong things. The best intentioned legislators believe the wrong things, and they may very well act the wrong way. And if they don't act the right way, then they could very well injure our rights. They could wind up censoring social media. And really, they may not have any impact on conspiracy theories at all. So what if it was the case that the people right now in Congress who want to legislate social media to tamp down on conspiracy theories, what if those are the people who are actually the ones who are spreading the most conspiracy theories? So, for example, if you go back a few months, there was a hearing where they had Zuckerberg and other tech moguls in front of Congress, and they're saying, well, there's so many conspiracy theories spreading on Facebook. What happens if people running for Congress and Congresspeople and the president want to share bad things on Facebook? And the question I had was, well, first of all, if it is indeed political elites who are sharing these ideas, it's not really the fault of Facebook. They would spread it anyway without Facebook, and they would be spreading because of the people in Congress and because of the president. And we need to do things to tamp them down from sharing conspiracy theories. So that's a very, very important point. I think we all have a role to play, but we have to understand that many of the methods in which beliefs get shared are still the old style methods: elite cues, motivated reasoning, and people having dispositions that lead them to these beliefs. And the internet may not be as much of a spreader as we think, and I'll explain why. So let's talk about some of those misconceptions that a lot of people have had lately. So one, much of the reason for regulating social media would be because people are supposedly becoming more conspiratorial now than they were in the past, and that effect would be due to social media. Well, this is an empirical question. Are Americans more conspiratorial now than they have been in the past? And are they believing in conspiracy theories now more than they have in the past? Well, the headlines would make you think that they were. I mean, just recently we have newspapers running with headlines saying we're now in the golden age of conspiracy theories. And I would forgive you if you thought that that was actually true. The problem is that if you go look through the headlines for the last 60 years, you will find journalists saying this almost every year. And it can't always be true, or else we would have fallen off the conspiracy cliff by now, but we haven't. So what does the data say about this? Well, first of all, many conspiracy theories have not gone up in belief in the last few years. So birtherism, for example, has been rather flat and stagnant. Other conspiracy theories, while some have gone up, many have come down over time. So, for example, JFK conspiracy theories have almost been cut in half from where they were from the 70s through the 90s. In fact, those beliefs were about 80% for decades, and it's only been since the introduction of the internet that they've come down. And in my latest poll in March, they were down around 44%. And that's perhaps the first time they haven't been a majority belief in decades. When we poll on generalized conspiracy thinking, what's the predisposition of Americans to believe in conspiracy theories? What we find over time, and this is just the last 8 years I've been polling this since 2012, is that it hasn't gone up. And that if anything, we could say it's either stagnant or maybe just going down a little bit. So we're not finding that Americans are becoming massively more conspiratorial than they have been in the past. And we're not finding that across the board they're believing in conspiracy theories more than they have in the past. The data just doesn't show that. Now, that could potentially happen, and I wouldn't want that to happen. But thus far, it hasn't happened. So if we think that there's a massive impact on social media turning everyone into a raving conspiratorial loon, we're not there yet. So I think that the best example I could give of this is the QAnon conspiracy theory. And this is a conspiracy theory which is rather fringe, and it's extreme too, in the sense that the beliefs are rather extreme. And it claims, if you haven't heard of it, that President Trump is fighting the deep state, which is comprised of satanic pedophiles and sex traffickers. A lot of the reporting lately seems to believe that this conspiracy theory is getting bigger in terms of the number of people that believe it. Now, yes, it's absolutely true that some people who believe it are running for Congress, and maybe one or two of them might actually win, but it's not getting bigger. So if you look at the headlines, here we have the Washington Post, QAnon is scary because it's getting bigger. These beliefs are thriving on Facebook. QAnon beliefs blew up. QAnon, spawned by a Trump quip, is now big and scary. Well, scary, yes, but big, relatively speaking, no, not at all. So what does the data say? Well, after a month of prolonged coverage in the mainstream media in 2018, I decided to poll on it in Florida. So we asked people what they thought about QAnon and said, on a scale of 0 to 100, where do you rate it? And on average, people rated it pretty poorly, so they came in with about a 24. And just to put that in comparison, we also asked about Fidel Castro. And if you know anything about Florida, you know we don't like Castro here. People danced in the street when he died. And QAnon came out only a few points better than Castro. So it was not well liked at all, and it wasn't very well known at the time. I've repeated these polls in the last few months, and I have a piece coming out in the Washington Post in the next few days on these repeated polls, both in Florida and nationwide. And it has not gone up in popularity. So it has not increased. And other polls that ask about it find that most Americans still don't know what it is, and that only about 6% in some polls say that they really like it or support it or agree with it. So it's not that big. And the way I would categorize support for it is that belief in QAnon is much deeper than it is wide. So what is the role of the internet? So we hear in a lot of coverage of internet conspiracy theories that the internet spreads them. And we got to be careful with the word spread. So when we say, is it spreading, does that mean that it's actually changing minds? Or do we mean that it's just able to be accessed in other parts of the world? Because if we mean the latter, then yes, obviously we can access things on the internet that we couldn't before very quickly. But is it changing minds? Well, that's a very different matter. So the popular views of the internet and how it changes minds don't really match what we're being told. So beliefs in conspiracy theories aren't really going up in recent decades. And in fact, it's not clear that what's been happening on the internet shows an increase. The forces that drive conspiracy theorizing exist regardless of the internet, and it may very well be the case that in previous decades or centuries, conspiracy theories either spread faster or had worse consequences. If you go back in this country 400 years, we were drowning and crushing people for conspiring with Satan because we thought they were witches. I mean, there was an Illuminati panic 300 years ago. Shortly after that, there was a Freemason freakout in the 1830s and 40s. There were 2 Red Scares in the last century. So it's not clear that people were immune to conspiracy theorizing in the good old days or somehow didn't act on them. Now, obviously they exist today, but it's not clear that they exist more or have more of an impact now. And certainly that's not clear that any of that would be due to the internet. Another thing we have to think about is that we have libraries that we carry with us everywhere in our pockets now, accessible through our phone. We have all the world's knowledge available to us at the touch of a button. But we seem to think that only the conspiracy theories have an influence on us on the internet, that somehow we go to the internet, it's only a swamp of conspiracy theories, and that's the only thing that influences us. And that's just not true, and it assigns magical powers to conspiracy theories that all other true information doesn't have. And I think that's an untenable assumption. Further than that, and I say this as someone who started his career in political science working on the effect of media on people's opinions, there's 100 years of media effects research that shows that news and campaigns and political advertisements just don't have that much of an effect on people as we commonly think that they do. And in fact, more of the recent studies show that the net impact of campaigns is almost zero. And I imagine many of the people of this audience, you're not going to be affected by campaign communications this year. You knew who you were going to vote for a long time ago. And that's the case in many elections, is that many of our political choices are made long in advance of even knowing who the candidates are, because our dispositions, which are longstanding, seem to drive this stuff. So when we go onto the internet, we're not just lemmings who are getting tossed one direction or the other by different sets of information that changes our mind back and forth. We're picky and choosy. And we tend to seek out things that we already agree with because it makes us feel good. And we don't change our minds very often. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what's on the internet. We still have to choose to access it. And then we still have to accept it. And it still has to comport with the things that we already believe. So yes, it's true that there are problems with the information on the internet, and we need to clean it up, but it may not be quite as impactful as people say. In case in point, a lot of people thought that the 2016 election was decided by Russian bots or something like that. And the newer studies coming out, you know, the big idea that they're pushing is the impact just wasn't as big as you think. Is that there wasn't as much fake news, and it didn't really have the impact that people thought it originally did. So another claim that's pretty popular out there is that Republicans and conservatives are more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. And there are, of course, good reasons to believe this. You have Republicans pushing ideas that climate change is phony, and you had the senator walk onto the Senate floor with a snowball and say, because he was able to make a snowball, climate change doesn't exist. And you've got, you know, this guy here who makes all sorts of crazy conspiracy claims I think the kookiest being that Ted Cruz's dad was behind the assassination of JFK. But here's the thing, those are but two people, and they don't represent the lot of Republicans in the mass public. So what does the data say? Well, first of all, I mean, there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there that are believed about equally by people on the left and the right. So in my recent polls on, do you think Jeffrey Epstein was assassinated to cover up what he knows? You have near equal amounts of Republicans and Democrats buying into that. In conspiracy theories about the JFK assassination, believed equally by people on the left and the right. And other fringier conspiracy theories, whether it's the Freemasons or AIDS was created in a laboratory on purpose, also believed equally by people on the left and the right. There are also conspiracy theories which are believed more by people on the left. So whether it's ideas that Trump conspired with Russia or that the 1% and corporations control everything for some nefarious purpose, those are believed more on the left than the right. And there are good reasons for this. The forces that drive people to believe in conspiracy theories, whether it's motivated reasoning or other mechanisms like that, they work on people on both the left and the right, both on Republicans and Democrats. And when we measure conspiracy thinking in the mass public, we find that it's near equal on left and right. So another claim we hear about a lot in the media is that conspiracy theories are for political extremists. Well, the answer is it depends on what we mean by political and what we mean by the term extremist. So some conspiracy theories are going to be believed by quote unquote political extremists, strong partisans, strong conservatives, as long as that conspiracy is somehow attached to conservatism or it's being pushed by Republican and conservative elites. So we find that people who tend to be strong Republicans are very likely to believe in climate change conspiracy theories, but only because they listen to what Republican elites tell them. And because Republican elites keep saying that climate change is a hoax, well, then Republicans in the mass public will believe that. Same thing with birtherism. And same thing with people on the left believing that the 1% controls everything, because you have Bernie Sanders out there saying that all the time. There are also beliefs out there after every election. The losing side always thinks that the other side cheated, and that just has to do with motivated reasoning, because no one likes to look in the mirror and say, well, gee, our ideas aren't that good, or our candidate wasn't that good. It must be the other side cheated us. I also find this with COVID being exaggerated. So because the president and conservative media elites have said that the COVID is a deep state hoax, or is the Democrats' hoax, or as Rush Limbaugh said that, Dr. Fauci isn't even a real doctor, or how some people from Fox News were tweeting about how people should go to the hospitals and film the hospitals because there aren't real patients there. Well, that's going to drive conservatives and Republicans who are paying attention to believe in those theories. But absent, these theories having partisan or ideological content, cues, or circumstances, then you're not going to find political extremists believing in these theories. In fact, you'll find people from both parties and independents buying in. So there isn't really a strong ideological or partisan valence to Rothschild conspiracy theories or Freemason conspiracy theories, or things about vaccines, GMOs, or ideas about the Holocaust being exaggerated, because those don't really have that much to do with mainstream politics or conservatism or republicanism. And a great example of this that always sort of surprises people is with QAnon. So when we poll on QAnon, we find that very few people like it, but also that it's equal amounts of Republicans and Democrats who claim to support it. And even though it's always called a far right-wing conspiracy theory or a extreme conservative conspiracy theory, well, there's nothing really Republican about it. There's nothing really conservative about it. And in fact, the people who support it come from all parts of the political spectrum. What binds those people together is that they have a very strong disdain for the political establishment, and they have very strong conspiracy worldviews, high levels of conspiracy thinking. So it's not like somebody got into George W. Bush and then that led them down the path to reading Ronald Reagan speeches. And then they read Milton Friedman. And then all of a sudden it's, oh my God, satanic baby eaters. It just doesn't work like that. And if you think about it a little bit, if you are a strong Republican or you're a strong Democrat, you're ingrained into the political system. So you're not necessarily going to believe a lot of these wacky conspiracy theories because you feel comfortable and you're part of the system. It's the people who feel disconnected from the political establishment that are going to buy into these wacky conspiracy theories, particularly the QAnon stuff. So how many people believe conspiracy theories? We tend to think that it's an us versus them dynamic, that we're the rational ones and then everyone else is the conspiracy kooks out there. Well, here's the thing, is that it's not an us versus them. There are an infinite number of conspiracy theories out there. On any given poll, I can't ask about all of them because there's just too many. But what we find is this: the more conspiracy theories we ask about on any given poll, the fewer and fewer people we find believing in none of them. So on my poll that I last ran in March, I asked about 22 or 23 conspiracy theories, and I had 91% believing in at least one. Imagine if I was to ask about 50 or 100 conspiracy theories, I probably have everyone buying into at least one of them, if not a few. So again, this is just part of the human condition, and we're all going to fall victim from time to time to a conspiracy theory, and there's nothing really wrong or pathological about it. But we do want to make sure that our beliefs are tethered to evidence, so we do want to be careful. I think the final misconception I want to address, or second to final, is are these beliefs just an attempt by people to find a big cause for a big event? And we hear this repeated quite a bit in discussions of conspiracy theories. And the answer I have for that is not really. And the reason why a lot of people think this is just an optical illusion. So there are conspiracy theories about big events like 9/11 and the Kennedy assassination and COVID. But all events attract conspiracy theories in varying degrees. So there are conspiracy theories about everything, but big events will attract varying amounts of conspiracy theories. Some small events will attract a lot of conspiracy theories. And what we need to think about is big event is a subjective idea to everybody, just as big cause is too. So even if we were looking to attach big causes to big events, it doesn't mean we'd get to any particular conspiracy theory about any particular event. So just for example, Kennedy had 80% of people believing in that for decades, but far more people believed in Kennedy conspiracy theories than 9/11 conspiracy theories. Was Kennedy really bigger than 9/11? 3 times bigger? Or moon landing conspiracy theories, when we poll on them, we get about 5%. I mean, was not a big event at all? And deep state conspiracy theories, when I polled on it in March, got 50% believing in a deep state. What event is that about that people are trying to explain? Or when people say aliens landed in Roswell and it's being covered up by the government. Well, was that really a big event that somebody found tinfoil and sticks in the desert? And now 30% of Americans believe it because they're trying to find a big cause? Well, that didn't seem like that big of an event. And what are the events that are driving GMO conspiracy theories or vaccine conspiracy theories? So again, I go back to the idea that it's really our dispositions that drive us to these beliefs and not some sort of search for a particular type of cause or explanation. So are COVID conspiracy theories new? And it does seem that these ideas are dangerous and scary, and they do sort of seem new because so many of them are wacky. But here's the thing, and I've heard so many conspiracy theories and I'm just bored by all of them. They're the same theories with just different nouns. So just as people say that COVID is a bioweapon, people were saying Zika was a bioweapon, and the swine flu was a bioweapon, and AIDS was a bioweapon. So every new disease is a bioweapon. It's the same theory, different noun. People are saying that Bill Gates is behind it, but before it was George Soros who's behind everything. And then before him, it was the Koch brothers who are behind behind everything. Before that, the Rothschilds or the Freemasons or the Kennedys. It's always some famous rich person who's behind everything. So there's really nothing new there. So there is much more continuity than change in the conspiracy theorizing that Americans do. It's just part of the condition. So just to conclude, yes, indeed, conspiracy theories can be very troublesome. We should work to keep ourselves and others, our beliefs tethered to the truth and to the best evidence as much as we can, because bad actions can spring from bad beliefs. And this is especially true during a pandemic. We need to make sure that we're following the World Health Organization and the CDC and not Todd from Twitter. But with that said, there are reasons to be somewhat hopeful and have some faith in humanity. There is more continuity than change. That we're believing in conspiracy theories is nothing new. It's not necessarily worse. And we shouldn't be blaming old human or new technologies. We should be blaming ourselves and the believers and trying to be nice to them and work with them to steer them towards better beliefs. But the mechanisms that get us there are longstanding, and they're just part of being human. So if you're looking for additional resources, I want to suggest my book, which is Conspiracy Theories, a Primer, but also a few other books. Mick West's book is very good, Down the Rabbit Hole. Brian Dunning's book on conspiracies declassified is excellent, as well as a few others. And Rob Brotherton's book is really good too, Suspicious Minds, if you want to do some further reading on this. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you for having me, and I'll be happy to take any questions in the time we have remaining.
Wow, Joe, thank you. Thank you so very much. If we were doing this live or in another Zoom format, we would insert thunderous applause here.
Well, thank you.
So we will have to imagine it. And I have what I like to call the secret life of Walter Mitty mind. So I that's what I'm hearing. I'm imagining applause. Thank you for so much of that. Interesting. What I kind of picked up is that conspiracy theories kind of go in and out of fashion, right? We're not in the Kennedy conspiracy theory fashion right now. You said that we're not at lunacy level yet. That frightens me because I thought we were.
I guess it could get worse.
But I am comforted that if I understand you correctly, QAnon is not as popular as Tiger King. That's great. And thank you for reminding me. We had an Illuminati scare in my high school. Long story. Very, very bizarre. And you talked about, a lot of things being a bioweapon, but I think you missed the biggest one from our childhood, which was cooties. Cooties was definitely weaponized to affect one's social standing.
Ooh.
Yes. So I see that we do have quite a few people who came in as you were speaking. And I just want to reassure you guys, this is being recorded and it will be available on the website tomorrow for you to jump back and catch it from the beginning. I was great. So you definitely want to catch that. But Joe, we have a lot of questions and I will try to get to as many of them as possible because I want to be mindful of your time and mine. So let me scroll here to the top, and I want to thank all of you. You guys listened and you made your questions brief as you could. And so, but I still have to put on my glasses because this font is small for me. Oh, and I almost forgot. There were a couple folks who emailed questions in, but I think you answered those. One of them submitted by email, and you did cover this almost word for word. Does conspiracy thinking skew more heavily towards the Republican end of the Democrat-Republican continuum? And do Democrats have their own conspiracies? And you answered that. We want to believe the other team is worse. That's the human predisposition. And someone asked by email, is conspiracy thinking genetically determined or can people be untaught?
I've heard that it could be genetically determined, and I have heard arguments about it being an evolutionary trait, and that could be true. It's just hard to test some of that right now.
Okay, and a question that I guess a very elemental question that someone asked, but very important. Can you define deep state?
Well, everybody's going to define it for themselves if indeed they
Okay.
do believe in it. But generally, what I see out there is this idea that there is a bureaucracy that is unaccountable to politicians or to the people, that has its own agenda and is acting in a nefarious way to thwart both public will and the will of elected politicians.
Hmm. So a little deeper than just the DMV is what people
Well,
are.
they are working to thwart the public will, definitely.
Oh well, yeah, totally. Or to sap the will, depending on your point of view. Have you found any evidence of, say, a fantasy prone personality? Like, or does some people just this is who they are?
So there are studies out there that look at people who are delusion prone and hallucination prone. They found that that those characteristics do lead people to believe in conspiracy theories.
Hmm. Okay. Um, can you do anything about that? Like, if you find, oh gosh, I'm that person. How do I stop?
Well, I think if you, I mean, if you think that you're believing in a lot of delusions, then you should recognize it and try to address it. So, but
Well,
maybe
yeah,
you're
yeah.
deluded into thinking you don't have that. So.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the will certainly has to be there. Is there a correlation between conspiracy disposition people, or conspiracy thinkers, and authoritarianism?
In some studies, yes, and in other studies, no. So there are links between belief in some conspiracy theories and authoritarianism, but it's somewhat elusive. So some studies find it and others don't.
Okay. And I apologize for my first couple of questions. My questioners, I did not say your name with your question. I'm not sure how much anonymity folks want, so it's I'm erring on that. And so please don't be offended if I don't say your name. Let's see. Is there? Oh, this was based on one of your slides. We showed the three old guys. And I swear I know those guys. I've definitely seen them. And this person says that research shows that seniors are more vulnerable. They share most of the bad information on Facebook most often, which is why grandma should not be on Facebook. But when she's on, it's hard to get her off. And what can we do about that? But again, being seniors being a little bit more intellectually vulnerable.
So there are studies now looking at what happened in 2016 with the spread of fake news, and they show a lot of it was shared by certain groups of people, with older people being some of it. And I think some of that is situational and had to do with those people being more likely to support Trump, and people who supported Trump being more likely to engage in fake information. Because if you think about it, up until the moment where he won, everyone thought he was going to lose. So if you wanted to get good news about Trump, you had to go to the fake stuff, right? So there was a lot of people sharing fake things up until the election, because they were Trump supporters. Whether that holds in every conspiracy theory doesn't really seem to be the case, because there are some that we find that are believed by younger people, other by older people. I've found that Gen Xers are sometimes more susceptible to it. People, my age, who in the
Wait,
40s
wait,
and
what?
50s.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What was that? What was that about Gen X? I'm sorry. I think we have a bad connection here. I can't, Joe, I can't hear you. Gen X is perfect. What are you
But we
saying?
are the X-Files generation, and that's what we were,
Oh
you know.
gosh,
We,
yes. Trust no one. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Good save. Good save. um, this, I guess, is a little bit more on the technical side. Can you tell us a little bit more about your polling methods? Are your findings generally consistent with those of other researchers?
yes, in most instances, yeah. But here's what you find is that we are just starting to learn about the dynamics of conspiracy theories. So where we have been studying things like political ideology and partisanship for 100 years, and we've been polling people from cradle to grave to see how these things develop and morph over time. We just don't know as much about conspiracy theories yet. We've been working on it for about a decade. The psychologists, and the political scientists. So every time we do new polls, we're finding new things, and there are things that different polls agree on, and then we're also finding places where we disagree too. But we are starting to sort of gel in the sense that it looks like there is a disposition. We are starting to agree on that. Some people are more disposed to believing certain things, and that these beliefs aren't really random. You can sort of predict who's going to believe what based on their characteristics.
Well, so it's a relatively young field and a growing field.
Yeah, and listen, you know, there are some things that I'm talking about that could turn out to be wrong in the years to come, and I will update my beliefs as the data changes and as the scholarship changes. And a lot of the things I'm talking about are just empirical observations. So right now, I don't think conspiracy theorizing has gone up, but it could. And you know, when that happens, I will both be horrified and have to change my mind.
Right, right. Horrified and still employed, which is great.
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned in your talk this. We think we're in the golden age. No, we're not. We're not. You know, we talked about this a little bit. This is the arrogance of now. We think our time is the most important time, and
Yeah.
everything is important.
I will say this though, just really quickly, is that
Yeah.
you know, the fact that we have a president who engages in this so much is a phenomenon all to itself, and we need to be concerned about that. Is I think is the bigger thing, is the problem with elected officials engaging in this sort of rhetoric, rather than saying, oh, it's the people who are doing it. When you put people in power with these beliefs, it becomes very dangerous.
Yes, yes, that is what keeps me up at night and what makes me reach for my Saigon bottle of wine on a regular basis. Not to drink, just to touch it as my adult teddy bear, so to speak. I have a follow-up question here about what you said about polling. Why do you think people are honest when being polled about their beliefs? And are there other kinds of more objective evidence about conspiracies? I mean, those are two separate questions, but you know, why do we assume people are being honest when we poll them?
So most people are honest, and we do experiments in our polls to try to check on this. And there are forces that could be going in both directions. So people may not want to admit to having a conspiracy belief, particularly if we're asking something, you know, do you think that the Holocaust was faked? People might not want to share that. And on the other hand, people might joke around and be like, yeah, I believe in lizard people, when in fact they really don't. But on average, we find that the polls are pretty consistent, whether we change the wording a little bit or whether we do experiments to try to find out if they're lying or just trying to express something that they don't really believe. So the numbers are pretty good. I think there are some times where you have to discount one poll or another poll, but on average, polls are pretty good at discerning this.
Right. I love that you said you think most people are honest. This tells me you have not been on any dating websites lately, sir. That one part, and you're married, so of course you're not. But yeah, that's a slightly different measure, I think.
Well, that's just age and politics.
I can tell Susan actually wants me to say her name. And hey, Susan, nice to see you, sort of. Susan Gerbic has a question. She's, as one of the most viewed websites in the world, what impact do you think Wikipedia and the guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia have in fighting nonsense? Thank you, Susan.
Well, thank you, Susan. I hope you're doing well. And I was hoping to get you to see you this year in Vegas, but hopefully next year. I think sites like Wikipedia are incredibly important, and I'm glad that there are very dedicated people out there keeping them up to date as best they can to fight back against the nonsense. I'll give you one example, and this is one that I actually brought to Susan's attention a couple of years ago, is that I had just looked up the term paranormal and looked at the entry for the term paranormal on Wikipedia, and somebody had snuck in there right at the very top, paranormal is real and ghosts walk the earth. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm glad that there are people out there keeping a tamp down on this stuff.
I clearly my time management skills are not on point because I don't know where people find the time to do this kind of thing. I love this question from Gordon. Do you recommend any reforms in education to reduce the personality of the conspiracy theory disposition?
Yeah, so we need more courses in media literacy, and we need more courses in critical thinking. So science is sometimes taught as like, here's the stuff in a textbook. It's a bunch of facts that were just brought down from up, up on high. But we need to start teaching our students more about how do we come to discover truth. And if we can do that, I think they can be more discerning in what they believe. And I think it needs to be done much earlier rather than waiting to college for to teach things about philosophy and psychology and politics and media literacy.
I will, if I may, do a follow up on that question because I don't believe my science education was great. I'm one of the kids that got here's the textbook, here are the facts, don't ask any questions, and pass the test. So I think that has affected me in my adulthood, and I just get to be lucky and get to hang out with really cool scientists who don't mind explaining things to me. But what do you say to adults who are not in school? In a formal education setting who they want to improve their media literacy, what do you tell them to do? And by them I mean me. Because I'm always trying to get better, man. I'm trying to cut through the malarkey just like everybody else.
So simple question, if someone was to ask me what should I believe and what should I not believe, I say reserve belief for ideas that have gotten a consensus of the relevant experts to get behind it, and don't believe anything until that point. So we should investigate ideas that maybe don't have a ton of support yet when they meet a certain threshold, and that's great. But I tend to reserve belief for things that have the relevant experts behind it. So if I want to know what's going on with COVID, I'll graze the news headlines, but I'm not going to put a ton of stock into it until the CDC says it or the World Health Organization says it.
I have a very similar approach to Twitter. Well, what I mean is I see the soundbite and I see something that's designed to make me mad. And I'm like, I need the context first. I need to, what happened before, what happened after, what's the history? And I find that keeps my blood pressure down. So I'm kind of being selfish and doing myself a favor there. We have I guess a couple of themes in the questions. I guess, and I can sum up a few of them with this. Can you name any conspiracy theories that turned out to be true?
Sure. Like Watergate, for example, Woodward and Bernstein.
Watergate was real? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I mean, Woodward and Bernstein were hunting down what was a conspiracy theory until, they found out it was true. And then you have the admissions in open court, the investigations that bring it all to light and show that this indeed did go all the way to the White House, and there indeed was a cover up and a conspiracy, and there was a lot more than they even thought was going on. So yeah, I mean, bad, powerful people, occasionally do really bad things. And I don't doubt for one moment that there are powerful people doing bad things right now. And part of being a citizen in democracy is being vigilant and keeping an eye on these people and, making sure that they, do what they're supposed to do and don't engage in widespread force and fraud, and that we throw out the rascals when they do. And that's just a normal thing. So we should always be on the lookout. I would never encourage us to get rid of conspiracy theories or to think that, they'd never happen, because they do.
Okay, so this might be a little bit out of my generation. So was there a moment when people thought Watergate wasn't real?
Well, yeah. I mean, when this first broke, a lot of the news organizations were very cautious with it because they were like, we don't want to go out and put out this wild theory until we have, enough evidence to really support it.
Okay.
And it took time to build the evidence, and then, okay, yeah, this is what really happened.
Okay, so clearly this was before clickbait. We've got quite a few people asking, and I think this is a really good question. How do we talk to friends and family about conspiracies, or how do we help someone stop believing, or do we just abandon the baby with the bathwater? Like, how do we talk to these folks if we still want to continue to love them and have a civil Christmas dinner?
I don't have a good answer for you, and I wish I did. I think there are people who do more work with debunking than I do. But I have family members who believe in conspiracy theories, and given what I do for a living, it could easily come between us. But it's just something you put people's differences aside, and you love the person for the person. And you have to make a differentiation. If somebody has their heels dug in, they're probably not going to change their mind, and you just sort of have to move on. But if someone is sort of toying with an idea, or they're not entirely sure, or if it's not that tied to their worldview, then those are the people you can probably convince without too much work.
Mm.
But here's the thing, just giving somebody a link or a fact check probably isn't going to change the mind of a committed believer.
No. And there's a similar question here. You know, that was a general, but very specifically to COVID. How do you deal with folks that you know and love that don't think COVID is real? Is that the
Um,
same answer? I mean, you know, just because it's specific may not change your response. I'm just curious.
you know, again, it's the same answer. It's, you know, you have the best conversation you can, point them to the best information. But if their heels are dug in, you may not be able to change minds.
Mm, okay. I'm reminding everybody I'm getting to as many of these questions as I can. The font is really small. But I will say that it is actually 8 o'clock, and this talk was scheduled to go from 7 to 8. Joe, I want to be respectful of your time. Are you willing to take a few more
Yeah, I could
questions
take a few
before
more.
we?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. 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 Let's see. Oh, this is a long one. Try to get to. Okay, question. Any explanation why so many anti-vaxxers are politically left, who presumably are more accepting of science otherwise?
So anti-vaccine beliefs are on both the right and the left, and they come about for different reasons. But we find that conspiracy thinking and a bunch of other predispositions drive anti-vax beliefs. So, for example, I mean, there have been outbreaks in places in this country where the pastor had told his flock not to get vaccines. And there were also been outbreaks where it was more left-leaning people who didn't want to get vaccines because they heard, you know, on Oprah or from Jenny McCarthy or something that vaccines aren't that good because they're not natural or something like that. Um, so they may have different reasons for coming to those anti-vax beliefs, but it's not really one side or the other. And one thing we have to be very careful of is we should not allow people to be elected who have anti-vax views, because if that becomes a politicized issue, we'll have a lot more anti-vaxxers on our hands than we do now.
Mm. There are again. I love you guys. You guys are asking really good questions, and some of you are on similar themes, and we are working diligently in the background to put those together and summarize. But a few of the questions are about some other factors like religiosity and mental illness and education level, authoritarianism, openness, and whether those sort of increase the likelihood of conspiracy theory belief. So if someone is very religious, or if there's some mental illness there, if they didn't finish, if they didn't go to college or even finish high school, or they are predisposed to submitting to authority, does this make them? Does this increase the likelihood of their being of following conspiracy theories?
So education has a negative relationship with conspiracy thinking, meaning that the more educated you are across the population on average, you tend to engage in less conspiracy thinking. But that doesn't preclude some college professors from being conspiracy theorists. So a PhD doesn't make you immune
Oh, darn it.
necessarily. Um, and just because you have less education doesn't necessarily mean that you're a conspiracy crank either. Religiosity, in some instances, yes, and others, no. It's going to depend on the conspiracy theory, but I don't think the relationship is that strong across the board. And conspiracy theorizing isn't a psychopathology, so it's not necessarily an illness. Um, and I don't want to confuse those two things. Occasionally, you will find some people who are mentally ill that will also believe in conspiracy theories, but it's not necessarily because of the conspiracy theories or necessarily consequence of the illness.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I have a QAnon question for you, and I'm going to try to read all of this. Sanjay was very, this is a very thoughtful question, I think. He said, you said that the QAnon movement is not that big. You compared it to Castro, citing it's only a few percentage points more popular, 24 versus 19%.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying since QAnon employs ridiculous ideas, devil, pedophiles, politicians, yada yada, how can we compare the numbers equally? Like a 24% belief in a fully bizarre idea is not akin to a 19% belief in a plausible idea. Castro.
So,
And basically, they're saying that 24% for an insane idea sounds actually serious and way too large.
so it's not 24% believing in it. So in
Okay.
that it was, what was the average rating from 0 to 100 that people rated it? And it rated about 24, which was one of the least liked things. So in Florida, when we ran that poll, people liked QAnon just slightly more than they liked Castro, which is not a lot. When you poll it straight up, like from strongly agree to strongly disagree, and say, do you believe in the QAnon conspiracy theory, you get about 6%. And that's about 2 percentage points higher than when we poll on the reptilian elite theory, but a lot less than birtherism, 9/11 trutherism, and most other conspiracy theories that I poll on. So, in context, it's one of the least believed things that I ask people about. Now, that could change over time. It could go up. And I'll also put in the caveat that some of the component parts of QAnon, like the idea that there's a deep state, are fairly widely believed. It's just when you add all the component parts together, satanic pedophiles running the government and eating babies, that doesn't have that many people, as far as I can tell.
Yet.
Yeah.
Sadly. All right, I'll give you a couple of quick ones. Hillary Clinton said there was a vast right-wing conspiracy. Was she wrong?
There were undoubtedly people working against the Democratic Party and the Clinton administration. They're called Republicans, and that's called Democratic competition. So I don't think there was a vast right-wing conspiracy to get her. And it's one of those things where it sort of became a coffee mug joke when she said it, because her husband's troubles, and oftentimes were his own fault and not the fault of some shadowy group.
Indeed, indeed. But let us not forget the emails. It's all about the emails. Is belief in conspiracy theories inherent in how our brains seek out patterns in events?
So people do seek out patterns. So patternicity is a real thing. However, patternicity doesn't necessarily get you to a conspiracy theory. So you have to be disposed towards conspiracy explanation. Because let's say you're very religious and not conspiratorial, patternicity could lead you, oh, this is all God doing this. Or this is the work of demons or angels or something in these patterns. Or it could be some other thing, right? So it's not necessarily patterns bringing you to conspiracy theories.
This is interesting. Is there any data on people who don't believe in conspiracy theories?
So, yeah, I mean, I tend to focus my research on, the answers to the questions which are belief, right? So in every relationship, I'll generally say, factor X causes belief in conspiracy theory Y. But if you just flip it on its head, it's having less of this characteristic makes you believe less in that conspiracy theory. But if you are asking about people who are on the extreme of not believing conspiracy theories, they're not that great either. And they run into their own problems. So imagine someone who's incredibly resistant to conspiracy theories. Well, that might be a form of naivete, where they're just rejecting conspiracies that really did occur. And we've actually found that in some studies that show that people with no conspiracy thinking actually reject conspiracies that have happened in the past. So it's sort of good to be, not on the high end, not on the super low end, but somewhere in the middle where you could say, listen, conspiracies happen. We need to be on the lookout, but I'm not going to believe in every goofy idea that I come across.
Let's wrap it up with a fun one, shall we? Well, fun is a subjective term, we'll see how it goes. What conspiracy theory do you believe that no one else does? Because you said we all at least have one. So is there a conspiracy theory that you believe that no one else does?
So here's the thing. It's I don't anymore, and that might sound boring or that I'm trying to be evasive. It's just I almost just don't believe in anything anymore. In conversations with my wife, and she's like, oh, I saw this thing in the news. I'm like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. So I reserve my beliefs for things that are very well evidenced. But I will tell you this, is that I was very much a Kennedy conspiracy theorist for a long, long time. So I grew up not only in the X-Files, but also the Oliver Stone movie. And I was like,
Okay.
oh my God, Oliver Stone, he found the truth. And I'd watch the movie, I get tingles everywhere. Like there's a hidden reality and it's all conspiracies. But here's the thing. I teach a course on conspiracy theories for the last 5 or 6 years, and I show the movie every semester, and I just watch it now. And it's just it doesn't hold water even on its own terms. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't even stand up to its own claims. And then you add on top of that the fact that Stone says he made half the stuff up, um, and you realize that a lot of this stuff is just nonsense. So listen, there are sometimes good reasons to entertain conspiracy theories, to investigate further, because we don't want to be naive. And whether it's any presidential administration, but particularly this one, but anyone, we always want to be on our toes and say these people have a lot of power. We want to watch what they're doing and be vigilant and make sure they don't abuse it. And I think it's very reasonable to be on the lookout.
Hmm. Um, Joe, thank you. Thank you very much. And I thank you for everyone who has put so many questions. I feel like there were like 10 questions there, and then I blinked and you guys just went nuts. So I really hope that we were able to aggregate and get to as many as we could. But that just sort of proves, the value of having a talk like this. And I will remind everyone that if you missed any of this or you want to go back over it, this is recorded. It will be on the Skeptical Inquirer website tomorrow. And I invite you guys back. This is our inaugural talk. Joseph, thank you for helping to kick this off. But I want to invite you guys back to the next couple of talks in our series, and that will be on Thursday, August 13th. Paul Offit will be there, and he will be talking about developing a SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. Is warp speed too fast? As a ardent Star Trek fan, I'm going to go ahead and say yes. But he will actually speak to that. And then again, on August 27th, Carol Tavris will be talking about the role of cognitive dissonance in the pandemic. That will be a real short talk, I think, because that doesn't happen at all. And I encourage you guys to mosey on over to the website and sign up now and reserve your space, not just here, but that space and time on your calendar so that you can be with us. I want to thank Skeptical Inquirer for organizing tonight's event. Joe, I want to thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise and sort of helping us put a bit of a dent in the nonsense. And I really do want to thank all of you in attendance. I'm glad that you chose to spend your valuable time with us this evening. And again, my name is Leanne Lord. I will be your host for this and the upcoming talks. And I look forward to seeing many of you back here on August 16th. Thank you and have a good night.